Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. Hope you're all doing very well today, and I want to make a short, fun, lighthearted video giving you my first impressions of a deck I just bought into 2 days ago. You're looking at it right now. It is Mono-Black Aggro in Pioneer, so I think this will be kind of fun for people who don't know much about the archetype, maybe interesting and amusing for veterans of the archetype to see what a total noob like me has to say about it with all of my 2 days of experience under the belt, and interesting to look back on in a couple months when I am experienced. But the background here is that I am, for those who don't know, a committed BGX player in Modern, and I also play now a lot of mono-red prowess in Modern. But I don't want to let Pioneer pass me by, and I know a lot of my viewers and supporters want to see more Pioneer content. To that end, naturally, I tried to make green-black work in Pioneer, and look, I think there's a variety of ways to make it work. It's just fine. Totally fine. I've been working a little bit on Seasons Past, and I think that's got a lot of potential, but here is the problem. I'm on a limited time frame for sure with Pioneer content, so I wanted something a little bit more proven to learn the format with, a little bit more powerful, and more proactive, quicker, right? Quicker. We gotta get the games in more quickly, because I am operating on a tight schedule, so I put that out there to the viewers and to the Patreon supporters, and overwhelmingly, you all wanted me to play either this deck, Mono-Black Aggro, or Chonky Red. And they're both awesome, they both look cool, but I did say at the end of the day, I'm the Grim Flayer, I'm the Green-Black X player at heart, so we're going to go with the Thoughtseize deck. And that is the first thing. Like I said, this video is going to be about my first impressions. That's my first impression of this deck, the most important one, that it does give rise to the mid-range style play patterns, even though it's not a mid-range deck per se, that we all know and love on this channel. So you've got the decision-making of Thoughtseize, the decision-making of Fatal Push. Those are already inherently decision-intensive cards, but when you are weighing them against going wide and deploying early threats that don't really scale into the late game in some cases all that well, that's a different context in which to weigh your Thoughtseize and Fatal Push decisions than the typical mid-range one. We've also got Murderous Rider as a staple in this deck, a classic mid-range 2-for-1, also a very decision-intensive card. You would not believe how often it's correct to play it just as a zombie knight without having gone on the adventure first. Really, really cool stuff. So that's the first thing I want to point out about this deck, is the fact that it is black, it is a Thoughtseize deck, and it is very, very rewarding of good decisions. Even though I'm very new to the deck and not that experienced in the format, I can already tell you that. My next impression of the deck is that it's mono-colored, and that's really strong in Pioneer. In general, lately I've been feeling the mono-colored stuff. I've been really enjoying Prowess and Modern, but here in Pioneer, I mean, first of all, we get to play with these epic, I believe Masters Editions 3 is the online set. Love these swamps, and we've got a painless, utility-rich land base, which is exactly what we want, but the utility is actually off the charts good, because Mutavault is busted strong in Pioneer and very good fit in the deck overall, and Castle Lock Thwain. This card is modern power level in a more mid-range shell. Like, probably only as a one-of, and only if the mana base allows for it, but still, this is a modern power level card. So when you consider, number one, that it's a total free roll inclusion when you're mono black, number two, the fact that we're in Pioneer, it's a much lower powered format, and number three, when you consider that we're an aggro deck, not a mid-range or control deck, so we're going to get Hellbent more often sooner, Castle Lock Thwain's value to this archetype is off the charts. So that's another immediate impression. We love, love, love the land base here. Big part of why the deck is so good. Another major impression that stood out to me is just how amazingly good this recursive threat package is. So in my list, we've got 4 copies of Gutter Bones, which is kind of the weakest one. Bloodsoaked Champion ×4, Scrap Heap Scrounger ×4 as well. I'm not counter-signaling Gutter Bones. This card is so cool. I love skeletons. I love the skeleton creature type, and Gutter Bones is sweet. These things really make the deck tick because it's very important to be proactive in this format. You play your stuff out, you start turning it sideways, and then you pick your spots to interact while you are putting pressure on. That's generally like good practice in Pioneer, but it's even better because all of these cards can be bought back, and we are a 24 land deck, so not only do we have these utility lands as mana sinks, we also have our 1-drops and 2-drops as mana sinks, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. So it gives us, we almost always have something to do if we're having a normal progression. We've almost always got something to do with our mana, lots of mana efficiency, and again, that early pressure is huge. So Murderous Rider, we already mentioned, this card is just so good. Let's jump ahead and talk about the top end, my impressions there, because Rankle, this guy does absolutely everything you'd want. He's kind of the Liliana of the Veil replacement in that he's just an attrition machine. Of course, he's not as powerful as her, and of course he's more expensive, but he also ends the game too, so he's definitely not strictly worse or anything. And the synergy between Rankle and this package of Gutter Bones, Scrounger, and Champion is absolutely nuts, because you can discard and or sacrifice, and it will always, almost always anyway, be asymmetrical in our favor, because of course we can buy back our stuff and they usually can't, right? Or they're not usually getting value out of it being in the graveyard instead of in the hand or on the field. Finally, Rankle is just an evasive top-end closer. Sometimes the early proactive recursive threats will get the opponent pretty low, but will not quite be able to close out the game. Sometimes just a 3/3 flying haste is enough to get us over the line. And on that note, Spawn of Mayhem is something that I think is kind of the highest variance card in our main deck, because sometimes it is exactly what you need. It is a big beefcake, evasive top-ender. You can sometimes cast it for 3. It's not that hard to achieve Spectacle most of the time in our deck, and that's really good. Then you're looking at a 3-mana 4/4 flying trample that does have the ability to grow, and the ping should really help us more than it helps the opponent. It's pinging each player, but look, we're the aggro deck. We're almost always going to leverage that better. And that said, sometimes it's clunky. It doesn't have any particular synergy with things hitting the bin. It doesn't have haste or affect the battlefield upon ETB. It's not a 2-for-1 strictly, so it feels like the most incongruous fit, but I still think it's really good. But that's just kind of why my impression of it, to begin with, is that it's a high variance card. But actually, the only change I've made since I've started playing, and I believe I'm 18-4 in the tournament practice lobby with this deck, which, you know, it's the lobby, whatever, but still pretty good sign, I guess, is I started on 3 spawn, and I was only on 2 copies of this 2 mana removal. I was on 1 ultimate price, 1 Grasp of Darkness, but I found myself needing a little bit more removal than I had access to. Like, the removal is almost always just good in Pioneer, right? So I ended up adding a Grasp of Darkness at the expense of Spawn of Mayhem number 3. So who knows about that? You guys, of course, one of the reasons I'm making this video is for your feedback on my list, so please let me know what you think about that and about everything else. But finally, before we go to the sideboard, I gotta talk about this guy because he is my favorite card in the deck, Knight of the Ebon Legion. I was high on this card from the moment it was spoiled. I was like, can it work in Green-Black Rock? Can it work in any context in Modern? I was like, yeah, okay, probably not, but oh my god, I wish it did. This is like the coolest card I've seen in a while. I love the art. I love the name. I love the design. I love everything. It's kind of feels like a perfect blend between new design and old design, and new style and old style for art, for naming convention, for everything. It's like a callback to Order of the Ebon Hand or whatever that is from Fallen Empires. So Knight of the Ebon Legion, such a cool card and such a great card in this deck, really. We talked about Spectacle for Spawn of Mayhem. One of the best ways to achieve Spectacle is to attack into a heavy board with Knight of the Ebon Legion with 3 mana open. You're threatening the pump, the Death Touch. Opponent wants no piece of that. They're just going to say, okay, I guess no blocks. Then you just chip in for 1, so you kind of got a free attack, and you get to play the Spawn of Mayhem for 3. Very good play as early as turn 3 that's available to you. But Knight of the Ebon Legion provides Another mana sink, as well as something that you can just turn sideways in the early game pretty freely, and it scales, it grows. Totally incredible power. I believe I got a turn 5 kill in a game while playing Knight of the Ebon Legion turn 1, Spawn of Mayhem turn 3, and my turn 2 was literal land go. I didn't have Mutavault, no other life loss was involved as I recall, just a little bit of disruption and just Knight and Spawn beats. Like, I don't know. And this, of course, is the very best shell for a very powerful card like Knight, besides maybe Mono-Black Vampires, right? So that's my final impression of the main deck, is that this guy rocks, this guy is awesome. Okay, guys, so sideboards vary, but I've really liked mine. Like, I looked at several lists, and I picked my own based on the cues I took from those, and I haven't felt the need to change it at all. The thing I like about this is I feel that we're able to overload on any given effect. If we need removal, we're overloading with this entire column. And also in matchups where removal's good, often these lifelink sources of the artifacts are good. If we need graveyard hate, we get to overload with a playset of Leyline plus Kalitas. If we need to overload on discard effects, we've got 2 Duress and 2 Davriel. And if we're in kind of a value mid-range style mirror, depending on what they're up to, maybe the removal's good, maybe some of the discard effects are good, the Planeswalker should be good, Kalitas should be good, and Aethersphere Harvester is probably good. So it seems like no matter what we're doing, we have the ability to basically side out a bunch of Gutter Bones, which is usually my go-to. Let me know, by the way, if you have a sideboard guide or any sideboarding tips. I feel like Gutter Bones is usually our weakest card, but of course, sometimes your Thought Seizes will be bad. Sometimes you don't need removal so much. Sometimes maybe you trim off the top end a tad, but I think Gutter Bones can often come out, and no matter what's coming out, though, we get to overload on the way back in for Game 2, so that's my broad impression of the sideboard, is that obviously being monocolored does restrict us. It does mean we cannot do certain things, or we cannot do certain things as efficiently, but look, this is also a format where you want to be proactive, and when you're kind of trapped into one color, things become a lot more clear. It's a lot more obvious what you need to do. You just commit to a lot of 2-ofs, maybe 3-ofs and 4-ofs as well. The one thing I will say, I'm not going to get too techie with the sideboard here, this is not a deck tech, but Shadow Spear is something I have not seen in any other published list, probably because it just came out, but look, I think this card is modern playable in the sideboard of interactive decks, especially if you benefit immensely from that trample lifelink stat boost. Therefore, I don't see why it would be any different in Pioneer. In fact, I think it's more powerful in the context of Pioneer. So if I wasn't testing this would be a second Harvester, which has been good too. And maybe we want that as well as the Shadow Spear. I don't know. I'm definitely soliciting feedback on my list, including the sideboard, but I think Shadow Spear can really fit really nicely in this deck. Great on our top-end evasive stuff, and also very nice to equip to our expendable threats. Finally, guys, I just want to compare my list to kind of the 2 most recent ones popping up on Goldfish. This is a 6-1 by Theo Jung from the challenge last weekend. Very much the exact same creature base, and I made my list before these ones were dropped, so I'm feel pretty vindicated here. The only difference is 4 Dread Wanderer over 4 Gutter Bones. To me, Gutter Bones overall looks slightly better, but really the difference is just marginal at best, right? But otherwise, the same exact loadout with threats and with 1... Oh, sorry, I play the inverse. I play 2 Grasp, 1 Ultimate Price. Theo plays the opposite. Close enough, though. Same exact land base. Sideboard is even more kind of committed to certain things than mine is, with full 4 copies of Duress and 4 copies of Self-Inflicted Wound, which I think is really interesting. It gives you a way to get an Edict effect in there, as well as hate out green and white, but little less flexible in some ways. It can't hit the Planeswalker, so I don't know how to rate that, but one to keep on the radar. As always, you can let me know. And then they are on the second Kalitas, but look, this is basically very similar to what I've been doing, so again, I feel like I'm on the right track here, feel pretty vindicated. Let's take a look at the most recent 5-0 from Leagues. This is by Wasticor, whatever. Another fan of the Dread Wanderer. I do think Gutter Bones is a little more common, but certainly Wanderer is playable in that role. This is something I haven't seen much. 2 Rankle of Pranks, they went down from 3 to 2, and all the way up to 4 Spawn of Mayhem. I don't know if I see that personally. I have also seen lists with 4 Rankle and no Spawn, and then 1 or 2 other things, of course, in those open slots, but going down to 2 Rankle, this is new to me. I wouldn't do that. I think I rate Rankle more highly than Spawn, but I thought this was worth pointing out. Thought it was interesting. You know, I'm in first impression mode trying to figure things out, and that makes me take notice. They do only have 2 flex slots for removal here. Stock land base, and another sideboard with 4 copies of Duress. Maybe I should consider going up to like 3 Duress, 1 Davriel. Maybe I don't know the meta well enough to make that call. Legion's End, very playable. A Noxious Grasp. There's a huge variety of black removal that you can play. It just really depends on what you're trying to beat, I guess. And another Rankle in the sideboard, that's an interesting one. So another 4 Leyline, another 2 Kalitas. But anyway, guys, this was my just brief take, my first impression about Mono-Black Aggro and Pioneer. I'm going to be playing this in leagues on the channel, but I have a few questions for you, the community, to close out this video with. Number 1, what do you think, if anything, people are missing? Like, this is your chance to let me know, and maybe for me to test it on the channel for everybody, if you think something is wrong with these stock lists. As you can see, my list and these 2 lists, they share a lot of, mostly everything is an overlap, basically. Do you think any of that's wrong? Do you think we're including anything that shouldn't be included? And do you think we're missing out on something that needs to make its way into this archetype on a regular basis? Number 2, do you think, and this is for the Pioneer veterans out there again, I haven't been able to play it that much since it's been out. Do you think anything in this core of this archetype is a ban risk? And if so, why? And number 3, do you think this is going to be a future-proofed archetype? In other words, do you think that for the foreseeable future, the fact that a recursive aggro deck with a lot of value and Thoughtseize probably being the thing that really makes it tick more than anything else is going to continue to be a tier 1 strategy, you know, barring any kind of crazy stuff like another Oko coming out for the foreseeable future? So I would love to know your answer to those 3 questions, my friends, and also your feedback on my list. And I hope this content's going to do well. I gotta follow the metrics, but if the Pioneer content does well in terms of views, I will be playing plenty of it for you, mostly with this deck for now. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to share any thoughts beyond the scope of the questions I just asked as well, and I will see you in the comment section. Stay tuned to the channel because we will be playing our debut league very soon with this, among many other forms of content just for you. Hope everybody out there has a wonderful day, and I will talk to you soon.